Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen with you guys, and we will get started. I just want to double check. Are you guys seeing the presenter view or the presentation?
Presenter view.
Presenter view.
What about now?
This looks good right now.
Okay. Perfect. So once again, welcome everyone. I know Dong May introduced herself. My name is Vanetta Thomas. I'm an independent consultant with a background in research and evaluation and capacity building, particularly for nonprofits and organizations that are interested in systems change work and are doing systems change work with marginalized populations or populations that are disproportionately impacted due to inequities in our systems. So today, we'll just start off with a brief round of introductions. I think I've met most of you already, and so I'm going to stop sharing really quick so that we can all see each other. And then we'll do our names, your organizations, and a temperature check. And by temperature check, I just mean like using the weather to describe how you're feeling today. So my name is Vanetta, representing myself. And today I'm feeling partly cloudy because it's gray and gloomy by where I live right now, and I'm ready for the sunshine. And then just a couple of housekeepings before I stop sharing the screen and we go around with everyone else. I'm sure you all know we've been in this Zoom world now for going on 3 years. Please feel free to utilize the chat function, the raise your hand, the reaction buttons. If I'm talking too fast, you can tell me, hey, slow down. If I'm talking too slow, you can tell me, hey, speed it up, etc. Please mute yourself except for when you're talking, and we've already asked for consent to record. So if you have hopped on after we ask for consent, please note that we are recording this presentation. And okay, yeah. So, all right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen really quickly. And yeah, we can just do round robin or popcorn style, whoever would like to share your name, your organization, and a temperature check. And if you want to put it on the chat because you don't feel like talking, that's fine as well.
I'll go first. I'm Pat Mason Dozier. I'm the Chief Dental Officer for Marin City Health and Wellness. I'm at the Bayview Hunters Point location in San Francisco. And my temperature, I'm going to go with the partly cloudy. I like that, the partly cloudy, because I've had one meeting after another all morning and I'm very hazy okay, at this point. And I haven't eaten. So that's adding to it. So that's a good for me. And hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone. That was a great share. Thank you. My name is Piali Banerjee. I am with TNDC. And my temperature for today is also cloudy. I guess it's very cloudy and chilly where I'm at. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'll go next. My name is Mary Ann Zito. I'm with the Department of Public Health. I'm the backbone staff for Shape Up San Francisco. So you might have seen emails from me. I am in San Francisco in the office today, not at the beach, as it may appear. But you know, it's pretty cold outside, but I'm feeling pretty sunny. I like seeing everybody's face. I just had my favorite salad from RT Rotisserie, so I'm pretty sunny. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marco, Policy Coordinator for the Health Promotions Program at Goddess SF in the Mission. The temperature, feeling sunny. I went for a run this morning and I just like kicked off my day in a pretty good way. Just feeling like I have a lot of energy. So yeah, I'll go with sunny.
Hi, all. My name is Claudia. I'm the Community Program Director at 18 Reasons, and I am feeling cloudy and stormy, dealing with a lot of little fires today.
Hi, everybody. My name is John McCormick. I'm the program manager at the Healthy Corner Store Coalition at TNDC. And Piali, it's nice to meet you. I don't think we've ever met. But I'm going to go with stormy in the sense that storms are exciting for me, and I feel like I got some exciting things happening. So I'm going with stormy, the excitement part of it.
And my name is Liana, and I'm an intern at Healthy Corner Store Coalition. And yeah, I think I'm pretty sunny today. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melinda. I am the backbone staff for the Sugary Drinks Advisory Committee, and I am Dongmi's cube mate. She's not here. She's at home today. And I am feeling sunny today. I'm happy to be here in the office to see my colleagues.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Barajas, Food and Nutrition Supervisor at TNDC, and I'm going to go with sunny as well.
Nice, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge Al. She's a health educator with the Southeast Asian Development Center. I don't know if you all saw it in the chat, but she's feeling like a good 60 degrees and it's up to us for interpretation. So thank you all for participating in that icebreaker. I hope it just was a nice little way to kind of just get us warmed up to what might be our second or third or fourth virtual meeting of the day. Before we kick off, I just want to ask you guys to take a few minutes and reflect and think about the last survey you took. What did you like about it and what didn't you like about it? And if I could have everyone doesn't have to go, if I could have a couple of volunteers who want to respond to that reflection. I'm going to share my screen again. Uh-oh. That doesn't look good. Let's try it again. So the last time you took a survey, and what you did or didn't like about it. And let's see. No one responded in the chat. I can go, I can say. The last time I took a survey was actually yesterday. Another project that I'm working on is with a nonprofit in Oakland that has services for folks impacted by incarceration. And we get a lot of queries and requests from students who are doing research in that area or topic. And someone sent a survey to me asking me to fill out information about the work we do. And when I opened up the survey, I noticed that there were like, select all that apply, but I could only choose one option, or it was asking me to enter in some data, but it had a multiple choice selection and it didn't actually let me enter in things. And so I actually kindly emailed the person that sent me the message and let them know that they had some issues. There were some entry issues with their survey, and luckily they were able to fix it and resend it out to their target population. So that was my experience. Oops. Anyone else have any reflections?
I can go next. I can't really remember the last time I took a survey, but I think generally speaking, a survey in the past, which I've taken, which I didn't really, I remember, I can name some of the things I didn't like about it. Number one, I felt like there were too many questions and a lot of open-ended questions. So I feel like by the second page, I had some fatigue. And I can see why people would just like check off whatever just to get to the last page. And you know, I think that's just really it. Too many questions and then open-ended questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I usually tell people if you have a lot of open-ended responses you're trying to get feedback on, a survey is probably not the best way to go. You might want to do an interview or a focus group to get more data. So.
I'll go
All right.
next. Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, I recently did a parent feedback survey for my daughter's school.
Mm-hmm.
And like Piali said, this one also felt quite long. I actually really appreciate when somebody estimates the amount of time that it will take to complete a survey, so I'll know when I want to start it, if I have time to start it. I also really appreciate the progress bar to know, am I done yet? Am I close to being done yet? And thankfully, it didn't have a ton of open-ended questions, but it felt really long. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a tricky balance because it's like there's a lot of data people want to capture, but our attention spans as Americans, or I shouldn't even say Americans, as people, like human beings, I feel like is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, especially as we have short form entertainment like Instagram Reels and TikTok videos. People just, if it's not quick, they're not interested. But yeah, thank you all for sharing. We're gonna move right on along. And so today, the purpose of today's training is really, we'll start by recalling some best survey practices. I agree, Rebecca. I like the progress bars too. Some best survey practices, and then we will move on to common statistics that are often used in quantitative data analysis. We'll review some data visualization best practices, and then I will share a link. And you guys, I think we have enough people to maybe do 2 breakout groups and practice analyzing a small data set. Any questions before we begin? All right. So just here's another agenda to kind of let you see the flow. Surveys 101. So as you all know already, surveys allow us to collect quantitative measurable data, and community-based participatory action research, we often use surveys to help us gain measurable insight on knowledge, attitudes, practices, and beliefs of a population. So you guys might frequently hear like the term CAB survey or CAP survey. The K is knowledge, A is attitudes, and the P and B is practices and beliefs. Participatory action research is very common nowadays, especially in community organizing, and it's pretty much a best practice. Sometimes people use participatory action research for internal evaluation reasons. And when we do this type of research, we really are leaning into the belief that the community members are the experts. We're raising up the voices of those who are impacted by the changes that we're trying to make. We're not going in and saying, hey, I want to make this change. We're going in and saying, hey, we've identified this problem. Do you guys also agree that it's a problem? And what do you think could be a solution? And so the solutions that you're vetting or you're creating like an advocacy or action, call to action about are oriented towards what the target population says that they need and they want to help solve the community's issue. We like to use surveys because we can get a larger number of respondents. I love mixed methods, which is a combination of that survey, quantitative data, and then qualitative data, such as focus groups, observations, and interviews, because the depth of information when you're talking to someone one-on-one or in a small group can help accompany those numbers. But sometimes we don't always have the budget to do those more in-depth qualitative research methods. And so I think of surveys as like quick and easy, large numbers. The larger number, the better. But even if you just have a subset of your population, that's pretty good as well. Also surveys, like I said, they're more cost efficient and time efficient. They're more cost effective and time efficient than interviews and focus groups. So as you all already know, so this will be a quick review, there are common survey questions that we typically see when we see our surveys, right? In the research world, we call surveys that have two options, binary or dichotomous. And so these are those questions that it's like yes or no, this or that. Do you prefer apples or oranges, veggies or fruits, etc. Multiple choice is when you have 3 or more categories. A multiple choice question could be a Likert scale or a rating as well, like that could fall within that multiple choice category. Likert scales are different in the sense that you now have a scale, like your options aren't necessarily a category, but more so a scale of items. It could be like agree to disagree, likely, unlikely, etc. And with the rating, it's kind of like thinking about your satisfaction. Net promoter score is a type of Likert scale, and it's the gold standard in customer service types of surveys. And then you have your ranking. Ranking questions consist of asking your respondent to compare between a list of items. So in a ranking question could also sometimes include a rating. So I might give you a list of colors. What are your favorite to least favorite colors? And you're ranking like, this is my favorite color, or like ice cream flavors, rating your favorite ice cream flavors, etc. So when you're taking a survey, more than likely the types of questions that you are asked will fall under these categories. So just looking at these a little bit more in depth, I think you all remember I was just saying how a Likert scale question can fall under rating, a rating type of question, and a ranking can as well. And so you see on the left side of your scale, a ranking where you are given some options and asked to rank them. And then on the right side of the screen, you can see a question type that is both a ranking and a rating. So you're rating the quality of a type of service, and then you're also like ranking that service. All right, so when we collect our data in our surveys, there's different types of data that we collect that we often don't think about, like what type of data is this or why is it important? But when we're thinking about, when we start to do some statistical analyses, it might be important to know the different types of data that you have. And so nominal data typically refers to labels or categories. This data is descriptive and there's no order or ranking to it. So think eye color, gender identity, favorite color, ethnicity, city, county, etc. Those are all examples of nominal data. Ordinal data could be nominal in nature, but it also has some type of order or ranking that goes along with it. So that Likert scale we talked about in the last slide, where you're thinking like agree to disagree, very hot to cold, very cold, etc. Those are examples of ordinal data. Anything with a scale, that's ordinal as well, 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, good to neutral, etc. And then there's interval data, which can be categorized and or ranked, but it also, those rankings or categories have evenly spaced intervals between them. And so the best examples I could think of were like temperature and dress size. And then we have ratio, and ratio data can be nominal, ordinal, or interval data, and it has a true 0. So by that, we would say like weight, age, or speed. The reason temperature data would not be considered ratio data is because there's no true 0 when you're thinking about a temperature scale. And then a notable mention when I think about types of data collection, but it's not a like academically like defined data type is demographic data. Demographic data falls within these scientific terms that you see on the screen. But when we talk about demographics, you know, these are characteristics of a population. The standard demographic collected in surveys usually consists of ethnicity, gender, and age. Sometimes we also tend to collect language, income, and zip code data. And because demographic information, some people consider sensitive, we have to be very, we have to use discernment when we're choosing whether or not to ask people demographic data questions. And if that data is not going to contribute to what we're trying to do, leave that data out, or leave those questions out of your survey. All right, so now we're going to dig into the data analysis piece. We've done our like 101. This is what everything is. And I'm curious, does anyone have any questions before we move on? I see something in the chat. Oh, okay. Thanks, Christina. I will talk to you later. Have a good afternoon. So Christina's hopping off, guys. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop it in the chat or just turn on your mic and let me know. All right, so thinking about statistics 101. Oftentimes we use, and more than likely you all will be using for your analyses, descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics help us organize and summarize basic information about a data set that we can present to audiences or stakeholders in an informative way. Crosstabs are typically in table format, and they help us to show the relationship between two or more variables. The difference between data and crosstabs is descriptive in nature. So by that, I mean, it typically includes like frequency counts and percentages. When we start talking about segmentation, or when I use the term segmentation, I'm referring to dividing the data set up or grouping similar data together based on a specific parameter. For example, if you disseminated your survey broadly, you may want to segment your data to compare responses by age, gender, neighborhood, ethnicity, etc. Segmentation is great and often used with the crosstabs to help show variation in data and variation in people's knowledge, attitudes, opinions, and preferences, practices. So on the screen, you guys see on the right, I just have like most common descriptive statistics used, average, sum, count. Oftentimes the count is displayed in a percentage format. And then I have an example of a crosstab on the right side. Some people call the crosstabs a contingency table. And here you can see what they're looking at are they're comparing across class rank and where people live on campus, whether that's on campus or off campus. And I'm gonna do a little demo, and in the demo, we'll put together a contingency table or this crosstab table to show kind of like what that looks like. Does anyone have any questions? I'm curious, are you guys all familiar with using crosstabs or creating contingency tables? Anyone? I see a no. Okay, I see some no's. Okay, a lot of no's. Great. So we'll create one together now. And oftentimes, I'm not gonna lie, depending on what you collect your data in, these tables can be made for you. And so, which I love, it's less work for us, but I will show you how to do one for future reference. And so I'm gonna share my screen with you guys again. Okay. So this data set is a made up data set. Hopefully it makes, I was going to use a real data set, but I changed my mind. And so, but the questions came from a real survey that are in this data set. So basically, we're going to pretend we have a town called Metropolis. And in the city of Metropolis, the local Healthy Living Coalition has decided to do a community health needs assessment to try to understand more about what residents think regarding their health, about health factors and risky health behavior, as well as to help them come up with some ideas that they can use to pitch in a proposal for funding, for a campaign or for a program. And so what we have in this Excel spreadsheet are questions across the top and then people's responses across the bottom. So typically, so let's just say for the sake of this example, this survey was provided in Google Forms. And I went to in my Google sheet and I downloaded the CSX or the Excel, CSV or Excel file. And now I have it up in Excel. And this is just what the raw data looks like in front of me. For me, myself personally, and what I recommend all of you guys do, and when you first get the data, you're not, it's gonna look like this. It's not gonna have the filter buttons on there yet. I always I just copy it into a second tab before I start playing around with it in case I make a mistake and need to go back to the beginning. And so now I have my copy. Don't have to worry about if I mess anything up, I can go back. So one thing you'll see is participant ID. Oftentimes, this is just a unique identifying number for the person who took the survey. I'm not really going to use it for my analysis, but it's there if I want it. Sometimes people might just delete this column when they're working in Excel. Sometimes they'll leave it. Typically, the first thing I do just for aesthetics purposes is I bold the question so I can easily see what it is. And I also like to use the freeze filter so that I can freeze that top row. If you are trying to compare, say I want to look at this first question and across all the rest of this data, a function you can use is the freeze panes function. And so you will highlight or click on the cell where you want where you want to freeze the column in the row. And in this, say for this one, I want to be able to see the first two columns in the first row. And so I'll go to the preceding cell and I will click on freeze panes. And so now, no matter how I'm moving my data, I can always see what the question was that was being asked and comparing it to this first question. So those are just some basics regarding like aesthetics and how things will look. Another function that is common that I'm sure you all have also used is this filter function. So say you're just trying to do some quick counts, you're not even moving on to tables or anything yet, and you want to see like how many, you want to look at like the different ethnicities that were represented in this survey. So we're going over here to our ethnicity column. I just scroll down to the bottom and let's start with white because I see white. A common function is the count if function. So whenever you're using any functions in Excel, you can use that equal first and then count if. And whenever you're using your a function, you want to put your range. This is in column I. So I to I 25. I forgot my range, apologies. And so then I want to put my range or my criteria. And for the criteria, I'm just going to click on white. So I know just as a quick and easy way to figure out what is the count of how many people like took the survey that were white. Another way you could enter this is you could also write the word white. And if you're doing that, you want to use quotation marks and you'll get the same result. If you don't remember this, it's okay. I can send you a little cheat sheet if you would like, and it is also easily accessible via Google. I'm seeing a message. Oh, the formula is count if. Yeah, and I can share this as well. Let me check this. Okay, I'm getting some feedback that the cheat sheet would be really helpful, so we'll do. Other really common formulas are the sum formula and the average formula. This particular data set, like if you're working with, I know the Healthy Corner Store, not Healthy Corner Store, I'm sorry, the Kaina, I know you guys have your community food hub. And so you have a lot of, I know that some of the data that you're tracking or bringing in is regarding like amount and numbers of food that are coming in and out. So that average and that sum count would be really helpful for you all if for whatever reason you're trying to do analyses in Excel. But depending on how you're capturing your data or who's tracking it for you, you might not even have to worry about that. All right, so I showed you guys just some aesthetics, how you can change how you're looking at the screen, the filter function. We use that count if function. Now let's create a table. When I say create a table, there's two different things you can do. So say you are just pulling all this information into one general table and you want it to look pretty. You can highlight your data. Go to insert table, and it just formats it all for you into a table that looks nice. So for me, usually once I've have my different tables that I might want to feature, I don't usually use the table format just when I'm looking at my raw data, but say I'm pulling out a subset of the data, that's when I might want to use that table format to organize it and make it look pretty for me. And once again, that's just insert and then this table function, and you highlight the data that you want to be put into a table. And so now we're going to create a pivot table, and a pivot table is the easiest way for us to look at those crosstabs. And you can do this manually. It just is a little bit more time intensive. And I can do a quick demo of the manual way, but I'll start with the pivot table because it'll be easier for you all. And I think that you all will get it catch on pretty quickly. And so I like to say that pivot tables do the work for you. And I often hear people say they like to use pivot tables because it helps them slice and dice the information. So I start by highlighting the data again, and I'm going to click on pivot table. You can click on recommended pivot table and it'll auto create one for you that you can then play around with from there. But by clicking on pivot table, I'm going to put it into a new worksheet. And we just have a blank canvas. And so something that's cool is when we look over here on the right side of the screen, we have all the different fields that were in our survey. And then we have how we want to look at this information. And so we can filter out information, and then how we want to compare information like rows by column. And so, and then this value bit is really important, and I'll show you why. So let's say that we want to start by looking at there was a question on the survey that asked people, what do you feel like is the most important factor for a healthy community? So I'm going to click on that. And you see it just auto-populated in my rows. I'm also want to look at, let's say I want to compare responses by how they rated the overall health of the community. I'm actually going to put that in the column. And now when I talked about this values piece, right now it's at count. And so I'm just going to increase the size of my screen a little bit. You won't be able to see the whole table, but I'll scroll. So as you see here, we're looking at what people chose as their first choice as a healthy factor in their community and how they rated their community. And they could rate it between healthy, somewhat healthy, unhealthy, and very healthy. I don't know why it's not in order. We'll ignore that right now. But in these cells, you can see a count. I'm just going to try to make these rows a little smaller so you guys can see the table all at once. So you can see the count. And the bottom, when you're looking at a pivot table, it'll always give you the grand total at the bottom. So just by looking at this table, you can tell that most people felt like the overall community health was unhealthy. And that looks like most people felt like, of the people who said that chose somewhat healthy for overall community health, it looks like most also felt like a clean environment was the most important factor. Most from the somewhat unhealthy group, not most overall. When we look at overall, look at this grand total over here on your right, it looks like there was a plurality. And what I mean by that is no specific category got a majority of the data. But it seems like between healthy behaviors and lifestyles and clean environment, that was almost about half. So now I'll go back. I want to look at my data, pivot, field settings. Usually when I click on my table, your options come back up, but they're not. Bear with me. Okay. I'm just going to create a new pivot table because I don't know why it's doing that. So we'll go back. We're looking at most important factors for health, and we were comparing it across what people thought of the overall health in their community. And as I was speaking of earlier, you see my cursor is where it says count. So say we want to look at frequencies. When I'm saying frequencies, I'm meaning percent. So you want to right click and go to field settings and then show data as percentage of grand total. So now without you having to do any calculations and you don't have to use any of the function features in Excel, you now have your frequencies for your data. And you can also, like if you want to reduce, the decimal point, you can, to just make it look neater on the eye. So as you can look here, we see 58.3% felt like the total community was somewhat healthy. Something else I want to point out is this age, not a filter function. So say we want to filter by age. You scroll and you would put, let me zoom. I put age in this filter box, and then up here is where your filters are saved. And say I'm only interested in looking at responses of people who were between 25 or younger. Now we can see 25 or younger. Or say we only want to look at 40 to 54. Now we're looking at responses filtered specifically by that age group. And say you're like, okay, I want to look at all the different frequencies for all the different ages at the same time. No problem. Go over to age again. Pull it down to row. It is a lot on the eye, but if you look closely, you'll see that now the data is broken up into what you're looking at, which is what they selected for the most important health factor, and then their age range. So people between the ages of 26 and 39, let's scroll across. It looks like no one between 26 and 39 that said access to healthcare was most important rated the overall health of the community as healthy. It looks like they were 4.2% said unhealthy. Looking at the wrong row. This is where that freeze function comes into play, unhealthy. So view, let me just show you that again. I want to freeze that first column. Or actually unfreeze. Let me freeze right here, C5, because then we can look at column A and column B at the same time. And so that's how you would do that. And now you can look at the grand totals. It is a little busy when you start looking at your data like this, but it's a quick, like I said, it's a quick and easy way to slice and dice the data. Depending on what you're trying to do, I often find myself, if I know I want to have a lot of different tables, I find myself creating, doing like a copy and paste. I'll like copy this and then paste it in another sheet so that I have this table ready, and then use the table function to make it into a pretty table. And then I can just keep going back to the same pivot table and not creating and changing my categories based on what I need, but then still have a copy of the table that I created. Also, if you aren't doing that many pivot tables, it might be easier for you to just have a new sheet with each different pivot table that you're creating, and naming that sheet, like at the bottom, putting some type of identifier so you can easily get to it. So now let's say I want to, and usually, I don't know if you guys noticed how the pivot table field went off the screen, then came back. Usually when you click within the table, your menu pops up. I don't know why it didn't earlier, but that was supposed to happen. And so now let's say I want to look at, I just want to look at how people rated the community based on their ethnicity. We have that percentage. Say I want to move it back to, I want to view the data just as a count. I move it back to no calculation. And now you just get numbers again. Just going to make this table smaller so it's easier to see. So what I meant when I said that for me, myself, I usually just copy and paste the table separately. It's not what I meant to do. let's say I'm gonna go to a new sheet. And now I'm looking at how different ethnicities rated overall community health. I want to make this a table. Now I have a table. I can filter it if I want. I can also do this. I can easily change my data to percentages or frequency if I want from here. Because there were no blank options, I'm going to just delete it out of my table. So say I was doing some type of report and I wanted to have a table. This is how I can present my table to people, to my audience. If you select all, let me just show you what I was doing, and then you take one column and move it around, it will automate the rest of the columns to that width. Now, say I want to put this in a table of some sort, right? I'm gonna highlight my data. I don't need the grand total column, so I'm not gonna include that. Insert. What I love about Excel is that they automatically give you some recommended charts. In this next part of the training, we're gonna talk about how we can look at data. I actually, to be honest, don't like either of these charts. But for the sake of showing you how a chart is made. And then you just have your chart and you can use the format tool to change your axes, your colors, add a title, etc. You have your legend. And so this just is giving me, like, at a glance, I can automatically tell off the bat that a majority of folks period felt like the community is somewhat healthy. And from those folks, like, white people were more likely to say that they felt like the community was somewhat healthy, and it looks like Black and Latino folks were more likely, or the only people who were likely to say that the community was unhealthy. So that was kind of a quick demo. I went a little bit over time in terms of, like, spending time on this demo. I hope that was helpful. I know it can be a little bit confusing at first. I really think you should play with the data. I play with the data all the time because I also forget things all the time. But the more you do it, the more it comes to you. If I can do more, like, one-on-ones with you all, if you want, we do have time for that. Not right now, like, we can schedule a time. And I will also put together a cheat sheet of metrics that I feel like are really common. Does anyone have any questions? Like, did you find that demo helpful?
Yeah, I think it's very helpful. Yeah, I learned a lot from today. That's great. The demo, yeah.
Great. So hopefully, I'm hoping that as you guys, I know some of you have already collected all your survey data. I know some of you are still collecting data. Oh, Vanessa, did you have a question?
No, I just, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's great what you showed, and I know it'll be hard to remember some of the functions you did, like how to go and change it to, so you get percentages and then changing it back to get counts. Could you include that in your, anything that we'll get in terms of like just an overview, how to do some of the quick, easy things that usually you would do in a data analysis?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
And so if there's anything else that you guys think would be useful, I am open to all questions and all feedback. You know, I think we all continue to learn. Like, learning is a continuous process. I'm not perfect with Excel, but I think that those are some basic features that are helpful to all of us, no matter, like, our capacity within an organization. And so we will take a break, but before we take a quick break, I did want to share with you guys one other thing, and that are platforms that frequently aid us in our data analysis. And that's SurveyMonkey, Survey Gizmo, which now is called Alchemy, Google Forms, Qualtrics, and Survey Analytics. Those are really common. With different health departments, I've used both Survey Gizmo, Survey Analytics, Google Forms, and SurveyMonkey. Different people have their different biases. I know some people really love Survey Analytics. I do not, like, personally. So just whatever you feel more comfortable with, or whatever your organization uses. It's all these platforms have a free version, or most of them have a free version that will fit your needs. I know that unfortunately recently Survey Gizmo Crosstabs is now, like, there's an upcharge to be able to use the Crosstabs function. Sometimes what I do is I just pay the upcharge for that month that I'm using it and then downgrade. But it just depends on, like, what your budget allows and what you really need and how often. If you're only doing a survey like once a quarter, do you really need to pay the subscription for more data manipulation? And I don't think so. Oftentimes Google Forms will fit all of our needs, and Google Forms also will do like an automated, like, spit out of things for you. I will say that between SurveyMonkey, Survey Gizmo, and Google Forms sometimes requires more additional data manipulation to get what you're actually looking for, or you need to, like, look at your raw data and clean it up a little bit before doing your automated tables. And so just wanted to share that with you guys as a resource in case you didn't already know that. And just acknowledging that we all have been sitting here staring at a screen now for an hour. I would like to invite us all to take a nice little stretch break. And the time is 1:56. Maybe we can resume at 2:01. Does that sound good? In 5 minutes. I see something in the chat. Okay, great. I'll see you guys at 2:01. All right. I hope you all had a good stretch break. I'd like to invite you to head back towards your computer screen if you walked away. We are entering the second half of our agenda, which is on best practices in data visualization. So a lot more fun than the actual data analysis bit, in my opinion. When you get a copy of the materials, I'll also send you guys a link to a UX blog that I like that talks about designing perfect charts. UX is user experience. Sorry for using jargon. It's funny, the term user experience has blown up, I feel like, in the last 4 or 5 years, or like human-centered design was a buzzword about 5 years ago. But all of that, it's a form of qualitative research. So it's basically like, you know, getting information from users, from a target population, and understanding how they're interacting with a certain experience or et cetera. It's usually, the term is used a lot in tech and in marketing, but there are a lot of cool blogs. When you look, when looking at data visualization, I will say people with the UX approach tend to have more interesting visualizations than academia. All right. So we're going to get going. It is 2:03. Why data visualizations? So data visualizations, they help us tell a compelling story. We use them, we're using pictures, graphs, etc., to grab our audience's attention and it helps them quickly digest the data. So for me, I often call it the squint test. Like, if I can look at a picture and understand what you're trying to tell me, that's a good visualization. That's a good graphic. You're allowing me to digest information very quickly without having to read anything. Common graphs we see from every day, like in our daily lives, are bar charts, which are also called column charts, line graphs, pie charts or donut charts, bubble charts, heat maps, and pictograms. If anyone is into the New York Times, then you have seen heat maps almost every day for the last 3 years, because they have, with their little COVID update that until recently was kind of like the main thing you saw whenever you went on their website. So now let's do a little bit of deep dive. So you have your data, right? And you want to think about how you want to use that data, how you want to depict that data. Some considerations that I want you guys to be thinking about are who is your audience and how comfortable are they with data? How much time do you have to grab the audience's attention? And what is the primary purpose of the data point you are emphasizing? So I really, really like this cheat sheet that's on the right side of the screen that I saw on a UX blog. And it's basically giving you like a guide to when you want to use best practices of using whatever type of chart. So if you want to look at composition, pie charts, stacked columns, a stacked area chart. I don't really like waterfall charts. I think that's harder for people. It's harder for people to understand waterfall charts, so I don't recommend that. But if using composition, if that's what you're looking at, best charts. You're comparing data points, a column chart, whether you're using vertical bars or horizontal bars, and line charts are really the gold standard. Radar charts aren't as common, and again, they're not as easily readable, I feel like. And so it is a type of chart. It's not one I recommend using. Relationship, scatter charts, and bubble charts are really cool and really good use for that. And then when looking at distribution, once again, scatter charts and histograms are helpful. Yeah, bar charts, again, simplest, most straightforward way to compare your data. If you want to know the quantity, ratio, and frequency of each category in a chart, try to stick to using a single bar chart. If you're comparing across categories, it's nice to use clustered bar charts. And if you're showing a relationship, like a part to a whole relationship, then using that stacked chart, this is the stacked chart right here, is a good idea. Pie and donut charts are, once again, part of a whole, and they usually represent numbers or percentages. And they're the most commonly and preferred way of depicting binary or dichotomous data. All right, so going into bar charts a little bit more. As you can see, we have 4 different types of bar charts on the screen depicting the data in different ways. So this is what I meant when I said, like, what are your considerations? What are you trying to tell? What's most important? Who's your audience? So all 4 of these bar charts are looking at favorite color, but what they're comparing it to or how they're looking at it is different. So if you notice in the top right or top left, right here, this is a single bar chart with vertical bars, and you're looking at favorite color based on the number of children who chose that favorite color. The left top is the same, and the bars are horizontal as well. Usually, if my label is lengthier, I will choose the horizontal over the vertical single bar chart. And I also want to point out how color was used, and that the bars are also representing the colors of the bars that were used also represent the favorite color. Now on this bottom, you have a stacked bar chart or column chart. And so we're looking at parts of a whole, right? And now you have the different colors by grade. So you can see very quickly that in the second grade, it looked like purple was the favorite color. So once again, stacked is good for comparing within a whole, parts of a whole. And then on the bottom right side, you have a clustered bar graph. So this just breaks those, it breaks those columns up into 4 different columns for each different color across the grade groups. All right, moving on. Now let's think about pie charts, donuts, and graphs. So this is like I said, pies and donuts usually show the part of a whole, and it's usually they use numbers or percentages. This is a donut graph that's looking at, someone's favorite fruit. And so I'm going to show you guys 3 different donuts and how they were used. I like this donut. It's looking at it's comparing across 3 different categories, CSS, Twig, and JavaScript, and like familiarity with them. And so you see there's a different donut for each method. And then the donut color is like filled, so to speak, with blue to kind of represent like how the percentage of people who chose that. And when you think about that, that's a little bit different than how the apples, pears, and oranges were presented, right? Like it could have been presented as 3 separate donut charts that were partially filled the way this one is. And then another way of using your donut chart is like tracking progress. So a a realistic example would be I was helping some dental clinics do like a short 5-question survey to to look at the experiences of houseless folks coming to this mobile dental clinic. Their goal was in 6 months, each mobile clinic needed to collect 100 surveys. So every month I would send them a dashboard, and I would, at the top of their dashboard, they would have a donut kind of like this that let them see right off the bat without reading anything, how close they were to meeting their goal. So those are just kind of some different ways that you can use the donut chart. I didn't put an actual pie chart example because that's something that's a lot more common that we see. All right, now we have line graphs, and a line graph is a graphical display of information that changes continuously over time. Within a line graph, there are various data points connected together by a straight line that reveals a continuous change in those points. So here we're looking at the cost of a gallon of gas over time. This is clearly outdated information, as the highest price point is $3.50, which I don't think I'm not going to go there. But anyways, this is a great example of a line graph. You can easily look at a point in time and get an idea of the average cost of gas. Something else that I just want to bring to you guys' attention before I move on to the next one is when you're creating your charts and graphs, I know I mentioned with the bar graph, like discernment and color. Something else to think about is also what you're using. So on this chart, so to speak, the lines are very helpful for people in making reference points. These lines here. And some, depending on what data you're showing, like the bar graph that we saw a couple slides back, there were no grid lines and we didn't really need grid lines. So it was very easy to see the information. Sometimes for me, when I don't use grid lines, I will put the data point, I will create a data label so that the data point is at like the top or within the middle or however you want it of that bar. So people don't have to guesstimate, they just see the number. And also thinking about your axes. Most of the time, there are times when it's not, but most of the time it's most appropriate to use a true zero so that you're accurately portraying the data. All right, now we're going to talk about bubble charts. Bubble charts use multiple bubbles or circles to display data points in a 3-dimensional space. The 3-dimensional space is represented by the size of the bubble. When creating a bubble chart, researchers typically size bubbles proportionally, position them on an axis, group by color, or add images and text. So I have 2 different bubble charts I want to show you. This is the first one, and it's looking at the top 10 films by worldwide gross profit. And so as I was talking about how researchers put the bubbles, you can see the proportion right off the bat. We can see that Titanic was between 2009. We're in the world of the Avengers, so this is no longer accurate either. But as of 2009, Titanic was the top grossing film, which is seen because this is the largest bubble. So we're seeing the bubble based on proportion. We're also based on these axes. We know that this was in 1996 and that it we get an idea of how much money it made, how much the budget was. And there's no images or like text on here other than the legend telling you what the colors represent. So this is another bubble chart that I really liked, and it was some random website and the most searched keywords on that website. So here they use the color of the bubbles to represent different like gender identities. So, and then they use the size of the bubbles to show what was most likely, what keyword was searched the most. And it looks like shoes followed by shirts. We have 2 more graph types left. Oh, okay. All right, so the next is a heat map, and heat maps are ideal for visually representing relationships between values using color coding. So I mentioned earlier the New York Times. I literally pulled this off the New York Times, a heat map looking at vaccination rate in the state of California. And as you can see, you have this legend that kind of shows you, you know, based on the color, you get an idea of the vaccination rate. Another heat map, this just uses one color that varies in its intensity or gradient, looking at vaccination status in the United States, or not vaccination, but COVID cases in the United States. So that's an example of a heat map. Another heat map that I don't know how many of us watch the news anymore, but growing up, we all saw every day. When you're looking at the weather and the weather reporting is going on and they're showing like average precipitation or like heat and the heat index and all of that, those are all using heat maps as well. All right. So the last visualization I want to show you guys that is often used in participatory action research are pictograms. And you're basically using a picture or an icon when you're depicting your data. So in this example, so to speak, it's looking at different, how different people, British people identify, right? And there's a little legend at the top. So one individual person equals 1 million British people. And looking right, or where they're based at, not where what they identify. Looking right off the bat, a majority of British people are based in England, followed by Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So you can kind of easily look at this map. We like pictograms because they're just a little bit more interesting. As you can see, when using a pictogram, you want to think about like what picture icon you're actually using. Like you wouldn't use an icon of a dog if you're talking about people, or icon of like pieces of fruit or things of that nature. So the icon matches your category, your topic area. Here's another pictogram, and it's looking at happiness levels of employees. I really like this one. It used, they used color. They use both color and like happy faces, the icons, to give you an idea. And so you can see a majority of employees are happy, slight majority. But there's only a minority that are dissatisfied, a small minority. So those are just 2 examples of pictograms. We see them a lot in infographics. So I talked to you guys a little bit about pointing out different ways people made their graphs interesting or make sense. And so here are some visualization tips, some do's or don'ts. Do use color strategically. That being said, keep in mind visually impaired. I know we all love producing beautiful products, but I guess a great example would maybe even be like my PowerPoint presentation. It has a lot of different shades of green. If those 2 shades of green are not distinct enough, someone that's colorblind may not be able to tell the difference. So you want to think about what colors may stick out more to folks who are visually impaired, and then just using your colors strategically, like that bar chart of the favorite colors. If you know, it'd be one thing if the bars were all just one color, but if you know it's red, yellow, and blue, but then you're using green, purple, and white, or green, purple, and black, that doesn't make sense. Start the y-axis at 0 to reduce misrepresenting the data. Arrange your data in ascending or descending order. It's just visually more appealing. And use the squint test. Can you look at it and quickly deduce what you're trying to say? If you're using a pie or donut chart, if the values are really similar, don't use it. You're not really saying anything interesting. Also, when using pie and donuts or line charts, if you have more than 6 categories, consider using a different type of chart, because after 5 categories, it just starts to look messy and it's harder to understand and see. A couple other tips. I think I said this, but I'm just going to reiterate it. Pie charts, stacked bar charts, and stacked area charts present parts of a whole. Single bar charts or clustered bar charts help us compare different values or show differences over time. Line charts help to show trends in data over a period of time. And if you're trying to indicate or show some type of volume, you can use a line with shading. It's just called an area chart. All right. So my next slide, I really want to hear from you all. I have 2 examples of some good visualizations being used, and I want to hear from you all what stood out to you from these visualizations. So here is the first one. What types of, and you can write it in the chat or just say it, you don't need to raise your hand. What types of graphs are you seeing based on what we just talked about? What are you noticing in this infographic? Yeah, pie charts, donut charts, yep. Pictograms. Great. Thank you all for responding. Yeah, we see a combination, which is something I like about infographics. You can put a combination of different visuals together on one whole. And so it's looking at statistics on child labor. You see an icon being used, numbers, the use of color for the numbers, how this 7 is in alignment with the 7 people who are a different color. This icon right here was a clever way of distinguishing gender identity without writing it. This symbol stands out. They're talking about hazardous child labor. And we kind of talked about earlier the donuts and how like you can fill the donut to represent a certain amount. And so that's what we see here. And these researchers did a really good job of utilizing the space they had. It's harder it's harder on the eyes to have a legend within your chart and within an infographic because it's so many different data points. And so the use of putting kind of the pertinent information within their pie. My only critical feedback is it's a little hard to read these numbers, but I maybe would have put it in a white font, but I can also understand how that would clash with the color scheme they were going for. All right, I have another example I want to show you guys. And so this one is looking at the beauty industry. I am curious, what do you guys notice about the bar charts and best practices? They do start at 0. What else? Anything else? Yeah, they did use the data labels. No, so the order in which they listed it, so for the bar chart on the bottom left is by year, which makes sense. On the top right, they did it in descending order, which is just a little bit more appealing on the eye. So say if it had like Unilever was first and L'Oreal was third on how the data was displayed, you'd have a bar that was like smaller at the top and a bar that went all the way to the end, or a longer bar right in the middle. And that can just be like a little bit jarring on your eyes. And so just in terms from a design perspective, data wise, nothing would have been wrong. But from a design perspective, the bar chart, the horizontal bar chart on the top right looks good, because it looks better because it's in, the data is presented in a descending format.
Do you think, yeah, I have a question. Do you think the color they pick is a good design? I feel it's make it a little bit difficult to read. I know it looks pretty,
Yeah.
but it's like for capture information that that purpose, I feel a little bit difficult to read.
Yeah, I agree too. I liked the visuals, but in terms of the color that they use, it was hard to read. And sorry, I think that when you're like, even though I tried to change the gradient of the photo to make it clear, it just would not become clear. So thank you, Dongmei, for pointing that out. I would not have used these colors. I think they're pretty colors, but I do think it's hard to read. I think they could have increased the font size and made the font bold. That would have helped a little bit, but I agree. Something else I thought was kind of interesting was them pulling out this piece of data from this donut and doing like another donut to show you. It's kind of like segmenting the data using a donut. They're showing that segmentation. So, all right. So thinking about the squint test, which this one did not pass, and also thinking about, you know, those do's and don'ts and what makes a visually appeasing visualization, we have a little pop quiz, just a little one. All right, so take a moment to look at these two graphs. And if you had to choose between A or B, which would you choose and why? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I see some feedback in the chat that talks about just the data looks cleaner in A. And there's also less categories. In B, there's so many different categories. It's really hard. It's not only hard to read the data point, but it's hard to differentiate what's what. And then furthermore, you have some categories that are extremely similar. And it just was not, this is not a good visual at all. And in terms of percentages, I would recommend, it's different for different folks. Typically in academic writing, when you're writing something up, people tend to use 2 decimal percentages, but I feel like for more like outward facing audiences, and when you're doing like a a presentation or like an end of year report and things like that, rounding up or 1 decimal point is typically the best practice. And so in here, you know, they also indicated based on 104 surveys. So you have an idea of how many surveys total there were. It could have also just said N equals 104. And then over here, it's just, once again, they're just trying, it's too much data. All right, next visual. A or B? A, why A?
I just think it says something more quickly than B does.
Mm-hmm.
For me.
Yeah, no. All of you are correct. B does not clearly state an x-axis. We don't know what we're measuring. Visually looking at it, A is more visually appealing. You can understand more like what you're looking at. And also the data is presented in a format that's just, it's descending. So like B, if that was over time, like if it was showing you some type of data point over like the span of 10 or 15 years, I would understand why they chose to have all the lengths of the bars not in a descending or ascending order. And if that were the case, my recommendation would be to use a line chart instead of a bar graph, because it would just look cleaner and allow you to more easily see the differences over time. So yeah, A is the better option. And then the last one, this one might take a little bit more reflecting, but A or B and why? I see 2 people said B. Anyone else? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree. B is the better photo. A is misleading in a couple different ways. What stood out to me right off the bat, I get the title, like how are baby boomers describing themselves? And they're trying to use an image of a photo to represent your whole self. But when you look at these percentages and the proportion, it's just hard to make sense. I don't really like this. 78% is much bigger than 61%, but 61% seems to be taking up more surface area. And so it's just a little wonky. I don't think this was the best icon to try to use. The data doesn't really, yeah, just like what Marianne said, the data doesn't really correspond well with the image. So whereas when we look over here at B, there are a couple of different things that I really liked about it. It's a bubble chart in the sense that it's a bubble chart that's using icons as well, using icons and proportionality. So as you can see, 64% was positive feedback. You know that positive feedback was the majority because it's the biggest bubble. And you know it's positive without even really reading the description because of that thumbs up sign. So I thought that was a very good example of a good use of a bubble chart. All right. So taking a look at our time, we only have we have about 25 minutes left, and I did want to have some time for people to practice that data set that I showed you all for the demo. I have it in a Google Doc, and I just want to kind of get a feel of, based on how many people are still here, how comfortable do you all feel splitting up into 2 groups, and one person can share their screen and like play around with the data and answer, just create a table and see if you can come up with any interesting data point by playing around with the data. Do you all feel comfortable doing that? Let me look at. Okay, I see that someone needs to hop off soon. I see someone says yes. I think in the interest of time, maybe what we can do is, because that was the activity was the last part of our training for today. So I'm curious, for those who may need to hop off soon, would it still be helpful to maybe do breakout groups for about 10 minutes? Yes, no? And I can post the data in the chat. Okay, I see one person won't be available. So that brings us down to, exclude myself, 9, 8, okay. Okay, maybe not. Dong Mei, do you think we should move to reflection, or should we, maybe I can pull the data back up and we can, as a large group, look at the data again? What?
I think maybe like we can do it as a big group to do together.
Okay.
Yeah. Like practice one time would be helpful, I think.
All right, perfect. I'm gonna share my screen again. And I kind of want, so this part of our training, we don't have that much time left. I want it to be interactive. So it would be no problem. Thanks, Vanessa. It would be really helpful if we're like talking to each other and I'm not just talking at you. I'm gonna share my screen again. And I would love like just to hear questions you all have, or hear like thoughts on I want you guys to guide me and tell me what to do, basically. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. So once again, this is our data set. We have our questions. They're organized. Maybe I'll spend a couple minutes, or I'll spend a minute telling you guys what some of the questions are, so that you have more of an idea of what you might want to compare or look at. So questions included asking folks, what is the most important factor for a healthy community? What they felt like was the most important health problem in their community. Oh, yes, I can share a link to the Google Sheet. That might be. Let's see. Copy. All right. And I'm just gonna, it makes more sense for me to share that screen. Thanks for that suggestion, Marianne. Can you all see the Google Sheet independently and on the Zoom screen? Okay, great. All right, so I'm just gonna do the same. Something, if you are using Google Sheets, something I think is really cool is when you're freezing the panes, you can use where you see this, the darker gray shading up here, pull it over to how far you want to freeze the pane. So say I want to freeze it all the way to age, I pull the bar all the way to age. Uh-oh, that didn't do what I wanted it to do. All right, so I pulled it all the way to question 2. So you see it's frozen. And then if I'm going down, I can freeze the top row. I'm just gonna go ahead and bold the question so it's easier for us to see. So now you all are kind of looking at the, okay, a quick count of how many males versus females took the survey. Of the males, how many of them are likely to attend a monthly healthy living workshop? Let's do it. Insert, pivot table, new sheet. Pivot tables are a little bit different on the Google Sheets. So this was our first question. How many males versus females took the survey? So I went to, in this, with Google Sheets, instead of having those 4 boxes like they had on Excel, you kind of have like rows, columns, values, filters, and you click on add and then you select. So I put in my rows, sex, and then I put for value, age. And so you can see right here, you're counting, summarized by count. I could also change how that is, how we're looking at it. We're just going to leave it on count. And now the next question was, of the males, how many of them are likely to attend a monthly healthy living workshop? So what I would do for this is for my row, I would look up how many would attend a healthy living workshop. Likeliness to attend a workshop. And because I already had the sex in the column as well, you can look at it this way to see it's already filtered out. So as you can see, there were 10 men that took the survey, and of them, 5, so half, were likely or somewhat likely to attend a monthly workshop. And then let's say you want to see that in a percentage, go over here to show as and change it to gram percentage of total. So now you know that about 21 to 22% of men were likely or somewhat likely. And over here is where you can change, you highlight the value and you can change your decimal place. So another way you could slice that data and still get the same answer. Let's say I'm going to remove sex from the row, and I'm gonna go to the filter option instead and put add filter sex. So where'd the filter go though? Oh, and then down here showing all items. I just want to show men, and now it's showing of the grand total. Let's do percent of this, or you can do percent of row, percent of column. Back to default. Yeah, so that's a pivot table. Some people think Google Sheets is easier. Some people think Excel is easier. I just think depends on the person and what you practice with the most. It is slightly different how you create a pivot table. Does anyone want to try another pivot table or look at the data in another way? Or does anyone want to share their screen and go through it? Okay. Another one with income? Sure. So we could go back to this pivot table and change it around, but just for the sake of repetition, I'm going to go back to our original raw data. I'm going to copy all the data. I'm going to insert pivot table on a new sheet. Also, just for best practice, let's name this pivot table like income. So, okay, looking at income, what do you want to compare the income, what people stated their income to? Is there a certain question on the survey? How about, are you satisfied with quality of life in our community? We'll go with that. So let's look at rows, income, columns. Are you satisfied with quality of life? Values, we're looking at the values for the quality of life question. And so people did a Likert scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being very dissatisfied and 5 being very satisfied. So just at a glance, oh, how did I know what to put in rows versus columns? I typically, when I am making my response is not going to be an academic one, because I don't know how I know, I just do. But my thought process was, when I'm doing this manually and making a graph, that I'm making a table that I know I'm going to put into a chart, I typically put the scale in my column headers and the category or question in my row headers. So here the question was asking them their income. And so I guess the question in the row and the response options in the column, I guess that doesn't work if I'm comparing. Yeah, it depends on how you're looking at it. I'm sorry, Al. I'll try to find, I will Google a more academic answer to that. But the way I in my mind, I think about how I want to view the data. What do you want the data to look like? Let's swap it really quickly and just see. Yeah, Marianne just said what I was thinking. Let's see what it looks like if we swap it. So we're gonna put, let's take this out. So for rows, instead, we're gonna do quality. Are you satisfied? And for columns, we're gonna do income. So this is what it looks like if you did it based on if we swapped it. So you're still getting the same information. I think that it's easier to digest the information with it the other way. But if I'm looking at it and I'm looking just off the top of my head, it seems like from what I'm looking at, people in the income range of 70 to 89,000, 70 to 90K were more likely to have more positive perception on overall satisfaction with the health of the community. And once again, if you want to change this to percentages, you go to values and you can put percentage. Say we want to do a chart. This is not a pretty chart, but just like Google will automatically also kind of, if you say insert chart, they will come up with a chart, and you can change this though. All right. This link is active and open. So if you guys ever want to like play with data, you can. It'll be here, but maybe create a separate tab with the raw data so that you don't, so that it's accessible for everyone. I hope that was helpful going through this once again as a group. Oh, it's view only. I will change it to anyone can use. Apologies.
Yeah, I just downloaded and play by myself. Play with it.
It's also in editor mode, but yeah, you can download it as well. If you want to play around with it using Google Sheets, as I said, Google Sheets is a little bit different. How you create the pivot tables differs than how you create them in Excel, but it's still you're going to get the same pivot table. It's just how you go about creating it and what you click on varies a little bit. Also, just like public reminder that you guys, every organization, it does have time for one-on-ones. So if this is something you want to do more of together, like we can schedule a time to do that. Like that's what I'm here for. I am happy to do it. I'm a nerd and I think it's cool. So tap into me as a resource, please. And I'm just acknowledging the time. We're at 2:54. And so I'm just curious, do you guys have any questions you have or any like initial thoughts based on the presentation today? Where can we find today's recording? That's a Dongmei question.
Oh yeah, I will send out the recording through email later. Yeah, after this with the slides as well.
Okay, great. I'm curious, in the last 5 minutes, can everyone put in the chat or say out loud one thing they learned today that they're taking with them or something they saw that they'll be utilizing in their data analysis? Pivot charts. Great. Oh, that's awesome. Data visualization, pivot tables. Yeah, you just have to, honestly, the best way to learn pivot tables is to just play around with them, spend maybe 30 minutes or an hour, and you can't, it never, I don't know. Some people are, I'm not a data analysis like whiz, but I think that pivot tables for our purposes, the way that we use them, it's very, they're very useful, and we only need to know the basics for what we're doing. We're not trying to do any like statistical analyses or anything like that. All right. Well, it's been my pleasure to be in community with you all today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I like this one better than the focus group one. We will have, for those of you that are doing focus groups, there's another training on Thursday. But you got to be prepared to talk because that training is a lot more interactive and it's a lot more application based than presentation based. So. All right. Well, if no one has any other feedback, I guess I'll see you guys on Thursday.
Yeah, see you all on Thursday. Thank you, Vanetta. It's
Thank
great.
you.
presentation.
Thanks,
Thank-
Vanetta. This was so fun.
Yeah.
problem.
And then have a nice day, everyone.
Have a nice day, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.